well on was that they hadn't gone through permission processes appropriately, but they were outspoken that there would be troubling demonstrations that could disrupt the student body beyond a natural.
So these weren't students at Rutgers wanted to get together. These were.
This is the National Palestinian Conference.
Right.
This was, I mean, Union, New Jersey, and Detroit, Michigan, and probably the two largest communities.
This is why we'd be at Rutgers.
Which is why they picked Rutgers.
So why are we against them having a conference? Like we want the conference, they we feel very upset.
No, that was fine. It was really an agenda that was being brought forward. Actually, it turned into sort of a year-long of activities for Israel awareness as well as Palestinian awareness. Because the conference itself and the agenda that they were setting forward that the university felt would be highly disruptive as the Jewish students, it was getting very dangerous.
What could happen?
It was physical violence.
In my time, we love these things. We love Palestinians getting together in conferences. But we organized Jewish, Israeli, and organized the negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians.
They have a dialogue group.
The dormitories.
Yeah, they
have a dialogue group at Rutgers, and the organization I'm working with is taking them. They're going to the Balkans to do a conflict resolution training summit.
Right.
And what they're taking for students.
Be nice time. So I think these are opportunities for us to
I wasn't working here.
to educate Israel. So
I don't know what the basic issues were.
Yeah.
I had two sons at Rutgers, though.
Divestment was the big issue was divestment, and that was the big issue. People didn't like academics talking about divestment movement.
What, at that conference?
At the PSM, yeah. Well, the truth, so the realities have never been violence and actually threats of violence. There's been threats of violence.
yeah.
We've never seen violence. Turned violent directly in other places.
Yeah, we can deal with balance.
Exactly.
Go down to
Keeps things interesting.
Exactly.
like I come out of the '60s, I mean, like I feel very bad with the Amona. A friend of mine sent me this Amona clip, which I haven't read yet. I haven't seen yet. It's a 9-minute clip on police violence in Amona, which looks, very sympathetic. But on the other hand, when we went through the '60s, it was like this is what happened in Gaza was the exception. What happened in Amona is what the police do all the time. Unfortunately, because it's we shouldn't be in that situation. But, anyway, so do you have a sense of when we should do this event?
I imagine that those of us who are here now.
This is the Indian, but it's 10 to 8.
No, I would say.
Right? So we'll do
about
trade-off.
14 or 15 people who RSVP'd.
Right.
Many of whom
Chicken that.
are afraid to go there.
Right.
So,
I have a 45th floor apartment. I can watch the weather clearing, and I was like, good for me. I mean, I couldn't get really ready for the show. Well, it's really nice that we get together to talk together, and I'll tell you what I have on my mind to talk about, and what you can actually help me with, and if it's suitable, we'll do that. If not, we'll do something else. But essentially, I don't know if many of you know Ari Kelman, Stu and Vicki Kelman's son, as the way I know it in my generation. So he was Ari Kelman, who got his PhD from NYU, and then a couple of years ago with Chassia Diner. Well, anyway, he and I have been doing 2 significant research projects on what I call the younger generation, but which he calls his generation, and you can call yours. Essentially, we're trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out, my own name, how does the next generation differ from me? The last really major work that I did. There's someone showing up. And I will now turn it off. I just don't know. Do it once. Hello? Hey, Adam. Listen, I should have turned the phone off. So, no, I'm not going to sleep. I'm putting some other people to sleep. I'm talking to some Melton Logream. So, I'll call you back later. Are you awake later? Okay. You be well. Bye-bye. All right, now we'll turn this off. I'm still not used to doing this. I still think fax machines are a major innovation. So the Jew Within that Arnie and I wrote together was, in retrospect, turned out to be an attempt on my part to understand, I think Arnie too, how does my generation differ from my parents, and how did that shift take place? And I realized, again, probably ex post facto, but now I'm very clear about it, that I'm really trying to understand how the next generation differs from me, or my generation. And I'm looking not at the Jewishly uninvolved, but the Jewishly involved. You know, people who care about things Jewish, and how are things shifting. To get to the end of the story, I think to a large extent we're seeing continuities in the next generation. The processes that I found in the last generation will continue. That's my take, but I would be really, really interested in hearing what you have to say about that. In essence, we wondered in the Jew Within whether the processes that we're seeing were late modernity or post-modernity. Post-modernity would indicate a radical shift. Late modernity would be continuation of modernity. But, yeah. So the question is, whether what we're seeing now in 2000 plus is late, whatever it was before, late Jew Within or post Jew Within. I think it's late, but let me try to lay that out for you. Ari and I did these two research projects. One we worked for the Andrew and Charles Brown philanthropies, and I didn't send these papers, right? You didn't ask for them, or you did, or whatever. You're welcome if you want. I can send it to you. We have this draft paper that we did for the Andrew and Charles Brown philanthropies. They have ACBP has an agenda to try to stimulate and get recognition for a lot of innovative young adult Jewish new enterprises, and we devised this research model design in which we would look at 4 different laboratories of innovation. One being Murray Silkoff's salon in Toronto, which is a kind of a model of we think a model of salons, which she started, which requires a certain degree of delicacy on her part. Really, it's a place where Jews get together in a very and have open and accepting conversations. In a sense, it's like it's kind of Melton mini school without the text, without that text, with a different text. Jews like to have conversation. Actually, when I heard about it and I heard how successful it was, I realized that the Melton Mini School did not represent, as I thought it might, a turn to Jewish learning, but more as a turn to Jewish conversation. And this was that Jews want to converse, and text is a way that legitimates their conversing. But I think they'd be just as happy to get together over other things. That's kind of my other Jewish things. The second node that we looked at was Amichal Alavi's storytelling true project. Like it's really kind of morphed. It's not just him performing. It's like 30 or 40 dramatists who are actually Jewishly quite advanced. I was director of drama for Camp Ramah, and these are not novices to Jewish life. We're trying to kind of to ratchet up Torah services and get people involved and they claim to be doing the role of the Turgoman, which is told was an ancient Jewish role for a translator, Turgoman obviously. Then we looked at Aaron Bisman's J-Dub Records, and its most famous cultural product, Yahoo, and who represents things that I want to talk about. And last but not least, Sharon Browse's e-car congregation in the West Coast, which has a number of analogs, as you know, around the world from a certain way. Now, be it, that was Adam, be it Hadar, be it Shira Hadashah, or Zaru, is it? No, that one. There's this other one, this guy who's a knockoff from Bija, who was raised in Bija. Tihu? Yeah, I mean, like, so there's like about 12 of these.
He's actually a
Yeah?
graduate.
Yeah, I think, yeah, when he was like the Melton Municipal person. Yeah.
Could you just clarify, because I haven't heard of, I know who Sharon Browse is, but I don't know what the E-Car
Yeah, E-Car congregation is a congregation in that meets in the JCC in West LA on, I was there, on like Olympic and somewhere, like it's in this middle class area of Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a few hundred people around it. Most of them are between 25 and 35.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people with kids, a lot of single people, a lot of like, and one of these findings is that the people going to these things are not the unaffiliated. I mean, these people who go to all this stuff, I mean, they have Jewish journeys, but these are people with generally strong Jewish educated backgrounds. When I was there for Yom Kippur, which actually may not be a bad example, and I was just impressed with all the HUC faculty and students who I saw sitting in davening there. And so those are people I knew, but it was a knowledgeable crowd. It was like the people who could daven with the sitter by the side, if I don't need pages announced, although they would ask pages. And Sharon's kind of the distinctive combination for that synagogue is we combine social justice, learning, and davening. And this kind of constant swirl of these things. Like, davening doesn't mean anything unless you do it outside. And if you're doing it outside, it doesn't mean anything unless you do it with some Jewish knowledge. So this triangle keeps getting reinforced, either in action or at least in spirit. But Sharon keeps pulling that together. She represents another, what I call third model of how to bridge the modernity tradition gap. I'll explain that. Peter Berger has this very, very useful trilogy by which he looks at how religions adapt to change into the kind of delegitimization brought about by modernity. He says that there really are three modes, and he says, and fortunately they rhyme: deduction, reduction, and induction. So deduction is bringing down the old, deduce, bring down the old way, and fence out new challenges, and pretend as if the world around us doesn't exist. And if it does, it's, avoid it. And so we have examples. But we have big examples, we have little examples. We may do a little bit of that in our own lives. Then there's the reductive mode, which says religion will adapt to whatever is happening in larger culture. And there's the inductive mode, which is most vague, which is to try to combine the best of deduction with the best of reduction. That is, it's authentic and authoritative, and it's also market sensitive, mission-driven, market sensitive. So it's like the ideal, right? So if you listen to the rhetoric of rabbis, and I imagine there's an educator's version of this. Listen to the rhetoric of rabbis. So there's some like deductive rabbis who say that world out there is sick, it's immoral, a bunch of shkatzim, shkatzim Jews and shkatzim not, and just avoid them. And I have I have the Torah, listen to me, here it is, take it, learn from it. And then there's the redux mode, which I hear all the time in Reform temples. We at Temple Beth El Shalom B'nai Jacob Elohim, some combination of those 4 or 5 words, which is like 72% of all synagogues use one of those words. That don't quote me. We recognize that there are many paths to Jewish life, many journeys, many ways in. Whatever way in you find compatible, we're here for you. And I've actually been in temples where this gets repeated like a lot. It's not a very brilliant point, but like there's a need to say this again and again. And I think that's an example of the reductive mode. There's this inductive mode, which is somewhere, it's not one, not the other. I mean, it's not, it's kind of not Robert Cordis, and it's not the Reformed rabbi. And before Sharon, I had one example, which is rabbi says there's a ladder of Jewish involvement and commitment. You may be a 3, I may be a 7, but I'm not a 10. And I will need to climb up, just like you will need to climb up. And what that already does is that poses the rabbi as being fallible, which is a departure from the deductive mode. And it's also a departure from the reductive mode, and saying it's not like anything you want. It's like, no, there's kashrut, there's learning, there's things that we believe in. But the rabbi is also being accepted by saying, if you're a 3, that's cool. Try to be a 4, and I'll try to be an 8. And so then I was interviewing Sharon, and I said, because she's tough. She's a very hard, halachic, conservative Jew serving a congregation that is kind of all over the place. So she allows drums but no musical instruments, and she walks the shul, and they love to be able to move the shul, but they won't because our house is where it is. And they're really hard Hasidim, but they realize that they have this frum person on their hands, so they have to abide. And it seemed to me that she wanted everybody to be Shomer Shabbos and kosher and learn and everything else. How does she deal with that? And she says that what her way of doing this, she does feel sad when people don't do all these things. But she realizes the only way to teach them is just simply to model her own commitment, her piety, her learning, and a commitment to social justice. And maybe, sooner or later, more will join her in that integrated Jewish lifestyle. So it really is, again, it's not berating and deductive, and it's not wherever you find meaning. It's something else, something in between. It's another invention of how to straddle, and I find it really quite fascinating. And itself is a departure from all the other things that we saw, which are much less normative, much less likely to broadcast certain norms. The other things we looked at for another kind of major paper we did for the National Foundation of Jewish Culture were 13 Jewish cultural events that had occurred last year in New York, from Seder Rama to what's his name? Brooklyn Jews stuff, and Matisyahu, and there's this whole kind of Jewish cultural life in New York that especially crops up around various holidays, Christmas, Hanukkah, Purim, Pesach, but other times as well. I went to a few things, and Ari went to a bunch of them. And he interviewed people there, and we taped the interviews, and between these two things, and I'm not going to try to bring together one, but I think we saw it. And that is to try to answer the question of what do we make of the fact that so many younger Jews, quote unquote, right now have little interest in conventional Jewish institutions, which means synagogues, JCCs, and Federation. It's anything at current payment. and insofar as they're interested in being Jewish, which the ones of these events certainly are, what's the nature of the Jewishness? How is it different from the Jewishness that they're at least temporarily, if not permanently, rejected? That's the question I want to try to answer. This is all background to that. So the beginning of the answer, the first major answer is that they feel demographically disenfranchised. And basically, the people who do these institutions aren't at the same stage of life as they are, and also therefore they're also not in the same social class. The people who support and run and fund Jewish institutions are people generally with 5-year-old, 7-year-old kids who are married to Jews. Jews married to Jews who have children already. That puts them into a different place in a lot of ways, psychologically and otherwise, and also puts them into different economic bracket than most people who are not yet quite there. There really is an income curve. I mean, some of you I know are at one end of it, and you feel confident you will make more money in a number of years. Yeah, you'll whatever you are, you'll do better in a few years from now. And if you're already you've already gone through that stage, and you're making more now than you did 10 years ago. There is a social class difference between the people who are in institutions and people who are out of them, in part because of age. And the next thing, because these people tend to be just out of school, or even recently out of school, even 5 years out of school, and they are not yet married, they are experiencing all kinds of mobility and instability. For example, there's geographic mobility. They move from the University of Chicago or wherever, and they came to New York, and now they're starting their next phase. It could be grad school, it could be early stages of job, it could be as a young attorney, it doesn't be very eventually high-paying jobs. But they're new, and they have friends all over the country, if not all over the world. That's what their real friends are, and they haven't made strong local friends. And the friends that they have aren't connected to each other, so they're in this very interesting friendship situation. One, two, they're recently moved just geographically as well as in terms of friends. Three, they're in a new phase occupationally and maybe educationally. And four, they are also anticipating a major change in their life. So they're going to marry somebody. They just don't know who it is. They know who it was. They would have married them. And so there's this marriage thing that keeps hanging out there that everyone knows is going to really shape your life, but the problem is you just don't know how and who. Like it's very different from being married and expecting to have a child, which you can kind of anticipate what the changes are. But this is could be a radical change. It could be Jew, it could be non-Jew. So they put off certain decisions from as mundane as what furniture that they buy, to whether to buy a car, to whether to buy to take out a mortgage. I mean, all kinds of things that happen once you get married, and certainly when you have children. So there's this instability which is characteristic of them, and therefore they're not going to be institutional in general. It's not like they're not institutional in non-Jewish spheres, not going to be in Jewish spheres. See, that's kind of number one, but that is a life cycle effect. It could be a long life cycle effect, and one of the things the Jewish community needs to know is that you can't just put Jewish life on hold for people who are going to spend 15, 20 years in this, in this nebulous state. But it's a life cycle effect that will change. Now there also can be, and this is what we call cohort effects. Life cycle effects and cohort effects are different. Life cycle effects is things that occur because you're at a certain stage of life. Cohort effects occur because you were born at a certain point in history, and you kind of carry these ideas throughout these preferences throughout life. For example, I continually question authority, and I happen to like confrontation on campus. I don't know why you want to throw things out. I want to bring them in. So I have, a fairly laissez-faire attitude towards soft drugs. And I like the Beatles and the Temptations. That's my sense of, and maybe a little bit of Donovan and Dylan. Those are cohort effects. Musical tastes are a good example. So the question is, and they last, right? They're the ones they're the changes that we need to look at most closely because they may affect Jewish institutions in the future. So what cohort effects do we see? The primary ones, I believe, are cohort effects that indicate a preference for crossing boundaries. The paper, the chapter we wrote, which summed up the identity issues, was entitled "Crossing Porous Boundaries." They view the Jewish community as overly bounded. I, as a sociologist, say, the boundaries are melting and we're in trouble. They see it as, whatever it is, too bounded, separating Jew from non-Jew and Jew from Jew, as well as class from class and other boundaries as well. So they would like a Jewish world which appears to be non-bounded. And what are the boundaries they want to, what types of boundaries they want to cross? Well, one boundary is Jewish and non-Jewish boundaries. So my idea of a Jewish get-together is a get-together with only Jews. Their idea of a Jewish get-together is a get-together with mostly Jews. A place where you can bring your non-Jewish lovers and spouses and friends, or, as we found out, your non-Jewish friends bring you. We had people reporting that my non-Jewish friend told me to go to this Jewish event, because the Jewish events had become hybridized socially. When I studied the Makor Cafe, it was 70% Jewish, 30% non-Jewish. And David Getzman just wrote me an email saying it's now half-half, which I don't know if it's true or not, but that's Getzman's. So there's one boundary is Jew, non-Jew in terms of people. Second would be Jew in terms of Jews. They want to go to events where all Jews feel comfortable. This is, by the way, this is a good example of a continuation of trends which occurred earlier. If you look at the Jewish community, a major piece of rhetoric in Jewish life is we want to be inclusive. We want to make all Jews feel comfortable with their being Jewish. Comfort is a major watchword of American Judaism. It doesn't occur in British Judaism. It doesn't occur in Israeli Judaism. It's American. Comfort is an American Jewish word. It appears in the National Jewish Population Study several times. There are three questions, and the only three questions on prayer. And they ask, are you comfortable in an Orthodox prayer service? Are you comfortable with the conservative? Are you comfortable in the Reform service? And I just take it as a symbol of the importance of comfort and inclusiveness and making everybody feel welcome. A major response to intermarriage is welcome. So this is part of that. This is not totally new, but it's got its own shape. Then they want to cross spatial boundaries. They like to see. They like going to Jewish things that are in non-specifically Jewish venues. So the Knitting Factory is better than Makor. Makor is better than the JCC. It's better than a synagogue, which is you get progressively more Jewish. Subpoint, kind of why, this is another point, but I'll shoehorn it in here. Because the value of a Jewish event is not in terms of institution or ideology, but in terms of people, in terms of the scene. Right? And they talk about the crowd or the scene that you will find at this event. So Matasyahu performing Webster Hall is really very attractive. He performed at even a judgment, or let's say Michael Strasser. He also the other one where he came from. Anshe Chesed. Let's say it's a big place. Let's think about it. Matasyahu and Anshe Chesed is a very, very different event to Matasyahu at the Knitting Factory. You can expect to find more. You get more non-Jews in the Knitting Factory, and you also get more Hasidim. Both. That they were real Hasidim at the event that Ari saw, and they were non-Jews. You did? Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know. Self-work? I don't know. Okay.
Yeah,
But like this, you know, it's dead women. But but this is like very, you know, from an educational point of view, this tells us something, you know, what we have. And last is crossing boundaries in terms of culture. And again, here's Matsuyahu again. We want a Jewish culture that plays with, imbibes, effortlessly crosses over Jewish, non-Jewish boundaries. Now, this has happened for you know, several millennia, right? It's not new, but it happened in the past. It happened kind of organically, without almost without the recognition of the actors themselves. Remember, Dillavai was telling me about the appearance of eagles in Galilean Bate Knesset. The eagles also start showing up. It's cool. Well, it's clear that it comes from the Romans. It's a Roman thing, you know, the zodiac, whatever. But the Jews then had been so affected that they didn't see it as being a foreign exploitation. Today, Jews they know reggae music is not Jewish, you know, and they mix like wearing, you know, whatever. What's his name? A Ralph Lauren clothes. We do not regard as non-Jewish. We just do it, right? It's kind of it's fashionable. That's the, and so Jews wearing contemporary clothing is not seen by us as identified as non-Jewish. This mixing of Jewish with Latin, hip hop studios, Jewish with reggae, is a conscious attempt to do this, and in a very positive way. B'nai Jeshurun, its music, imports other musical traditions very consciously, at a certain level, not too much, not too little. Debbie Friedman was a clear, you know, I hear Debbie Friedman, and a lot of her music, and I think it doesn't work for me. To me, it sounds Christian. I'm applying my musical, you know, sense, but others it doesn't. It's authentically Jewish because they grew up with it, and it's extraordinarily powerful and it works for people. So I don't feel like that all music, just some of it. Anyway, so these are some of the things we're seeing there. Now, and again, as I said, they're kind of extensions of previous models. There's a couple others, and I'll open for your comment. I'm really curious to know, see what we can say about this. One of the things that they really deeply oppose is what they see as coercive Jewish institutions, or institutions that have an agenda. The agenda is to change you. So I'll give you an example of how this works in social justice work. Ruth Messenger's social justice activities are extraordinarily, I think, well attuned to this group, in that she is saying we Jews need to make our contribution in the world. And she'll raise money from Jewish institutions to say, I'm going to bring young Jews into this activity. And I'll offer them the possibility of studying Jewish texts at the same time as they're, you know, doing social justice hard work. But what she doesn't do, that I think, I need to check this out, I think David Rosen from Abu Dhabi does do, she doesn't tell you, you come here and I'm going to make you a better person, make you a better Jewish person. She honestly doesn't have the agenda of working on these people so that if they see the significance of what they're doing and they change their perspective on Judaism, social justice, it'll happen, but it's really, it's a byproduct of the primary commitment, which is to make a contribution to stop the genocide in Darfur, to build better water carriers in parts of the third world. And anyway, so these young people are very see the Jewish world as being coercive and closed, and also trying to operate upon them. And the activities that they have, and this is why Sharon is such kind of the exception. Maybe shuls are maybe an exception, but almost all the other activities are extraordinarily accepting, non-judgmental, genuinely not coercive. Murray Solkoff has absolutely couldn't care less what Jews get out of her experience, except that they should have a stimulating time there. But she's not looking to change them, to make them educated or more committed Jews. That's not about her. It's just not. I don't think it's true of Aaron Bismuth either. Just wants good Jewish music. It may have a community building effect. That's wonderful, but it's just not what he's about. And even on Michael Levi, he's got a sense that one day there'll be a revolution in Jewish worship. And he'll bring it back. And there are these Jews who really are crying out for stimulating, exciting services that he could give them. But it's not going to. It's really it's a different thing. And the reason I reacted so strongly to this Rutgers thing than I did is that I think we need a Jewish community that allows for just a lot of challenge and a lot of excitement and all kinds of antagonistic, antipathetic, wrong attitudes out there and just get them expressed. And right now there's a sense of that there's only certain things you can do. And that's what they're saying. I'm totally agree with them. Coercive, institutional, just going down my little checklist. I don't have in my head. Some batteries. The last point I want to say about this is that I'm struck with the extent to which these events, programs, innovations are propelled by unusually dedicated, creative, successful, talented individual entrepreneurs. That at the center of each one of them is someone who's absolutely mishugal davar and just really, really good at it, and possibly lucky, and willing to put up with great personal hardship and sacrifice to see this thing happen. I think they're heroes. They're just great people. I mean, I can see doing that when you're 22. Not when you're 32. These people are 32, and they're like some of them living in poverty or without accumulating resources. Things that I did when I was. By the time I was 32, I was already associate professor. I was building. I wasn't taking those kinds of risks. And these people are, and I just regard what they're doing as really heroic. I can just feel terrible that the such important work and the Jewish community, the organized Jewish community, doesn't quite recognize them. And my advice to everybody is don't do what they do. Like take a normal job. You change the world, but do it in your spare time. Do a job. Run a congregational school. Don't talk about how you're going to start a new thing, because you'll get burned out, and it probably won't work on an individual basis. If you do it anyway, call it the Lord and Harizah Mishubach. But there's so many. Actually, there are 30-somethings. There are a lot of 30-somethings running around saying, "I've got this great idea. All I need is to find somebody who's going to back me." But there's a lot of these people, and they're very good. And one out of whatever, 15, 20 are going to succeed. But for any one individual, I'm saying, don't do it. You'll suffer. But nevertheless, these people, the ones I mentioned, did it, and they're doing it, and they're enriching our life as a result. Okay, so those are my opening thoughts, and I would love to have you help me fill them out and comment on anything that struck you, and especially things that I have a wrong take, where you say, "Gee, that doesn't make sense." I really, really want to invite you to do this. Or could you help me speak to you better? I have a sense that we have somewhat different languages here. I'm using my language. I'm born in 1950. You're born in 1970, plus or minus, some of you. Could you help me translate it? There's some of the things that I said that don't quite sit well, that seem right, or things that actually you want to contribute. You say, no, that's fine, but I have something else to add. So any way in which you can be helpful, I'll be very appreciative. Yeah?
I was struck by the 4 individuals that you selected.
Uh-huh.
I actually don't know the first one, so tough. But I know Amichai, and I'm familiar with Matitiao, and I know, I mean, I've met Karen Browse. But I think it might be interesting in continuing if you're looking, well, I wanted to hear why you selected those 4. Did you have a much larger pool and you sifted it down to those 4 for a particular reason? And then I had some other ideas about
dimensions of diversity, geographic, gender, form, like once there were a bunch of synagogues, we took one of them, there were a bunch of cultural events. We took,
okay.
right. And so we just wanted 4 very different things in 4 very different places. Thinking that somehow, and there is no way to pick any 4 and have it unchallenged, but if they're different enough, we can kind of see things. But
well, that makes sense.
yeah, I know.
There's some other interesting. You're probably familiar with like the Manhattan Jewish Experience.
No, tell
which
me.
is I went there for people familiar with that. A friend of mine took me to a dinner there because Joey Law from Israel at Heart. Are you familiar with that? This is rather well. Okay, so Manhattan Jewish Experience is an outreach. Some young charismatic rabbi decided that he wanted to offer Orthodox Judaism to young professionals.
Okay.
And so he has this really fancy schmancy, he's in the Jewish Center, I think, on the 8th floor, really beautiful, like kind of palatial.
It wasn't beautiful till this year.
Oh, now it's okay.
I remember the 8th floor.
Yeah, and they have,
Oh,
yeah, and they have, these beautiful Friday night dinners, and they have speakers, and they have classes, and it's very interesting because it's clearly trying to market Orthodox Judaism, but in a very, they're very smiley, they're very sweet, going up, there's a non-Jew, which is the elevator for you on Shabbat, and all these people were turning their cell phones off on Shabbat, providing them. So that was my experience. So that's just another example of an interesting person who, again, is not working in a synagogue, right? He's working in, well, there actually is the Jewish Center downstairs, so
right.
You have your choice of minyanim, but he's got his own thing, and there's a few, I think there are a couple of rabbis working together, and they're all young and charismatic and smiling. And there's some other interesting things going on, like the whole ecology movement. So there's like the Teva Learning Center, and there's Jewish farming going on in a few places around the country.
And a school, they're starting a school, the Jewish farming school.
Yeah, I mean that movement, which started, I think, really started taking off in the 90s. And so there's like the Adama program where people farm together and learn, and there's different permutations of that.
Right. Not just average.
Yeah, and then
the Manhattan Jewish.
and then there's certain literary, like there's Heed magazine,
right.
and there's another one that started. I mean, there's like
Guilty Pleasure.
That's
Bryce Lookoff.
Oh, okay.
Same lady, but it was also backed by Rothman's money.
Yeah. And I was personally involved in an organization in New York called Alliance for Judaism and Social Justice in the early 90s. We were sort of a break-off from Tikkun magazine, and we had all these little umbrella organizations. We had a cultural group, we had a chavurah that met both uptown and downtown, we had a group for gays and lesbians, and many things, and the only thing that's left is the chavurah. Everything else sort of folded on a discussion list. But so it's interesting, I mean, as people moved away, and
Right.
So anyway, it's just fascinating to see. I mean, I'm looking forward to reading your paper, and it's very interesting the creativity that's happening in the Jewish community. But what I'm worried about is that it sounds like Amichai, for example, is at the center of this storytelling, and once you remove the charismatic leader, will there be any kind of participation amongst the communities that join these things, or as soon as they decide to go off and do something else, will these things fold? Or
that's one. It's a really serious question. Like, I know that Marie Solkoff was someone trying to copy her and to do a salon. She's like, sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work.
And the other thing that's interesting is this
like,
sort of
what happens when Sharon were to say, I can't do this. I have 2 kids now.
Yeah, right.
No, she's going to have.
Yeah. There's also kind of an
What happens in Tara?
There's like an anti-denominationalism happening, I think, as well, which I'm going to let other people talk, but I've been participating in community day schools and the Harmon Institute and Hadar and other institutions that are I always hear people in their 20s and 30s saying, oh, well, I was raised conservative, now I'm post-denominational or reconformorthodox, or,
I have a paper in Contact magazine, a little two-pager in Contact magazine, which I attribute trans-denominationalism to the cast-offs from the conservative movement. These are basically conservative movement successes and failures. Successes Jewishly, failures in terms of people. I'm so Jewish, but I don't want that conservative movement. Hadar, by the way, being Hadar and Ikar, being two classic cases. There's no reason why they shouldn't be conservative. They don't want to be conservative.
Yeah, although I heard someone in Israel this summer say I'm a post-Orthodox Jew. I've heard people
Some, yes,
also
right,
sort of shed that.
Right, but mostly there's people with conservative roots, and David Gordis's Hebrew College from Boston.
Yeah.
Gordis is a conservative rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
Like 3/4 of the kids going to their supplementary school are coming out of conservative synagogues. The Reformed temples are able to hold them, conservative synagogues can't. There's something going on in the conservative movement that is a double-edged sword. I can't exactly figure out what it is, but
it's an exodus from the movement, but an entry into something else.
Actually, the movement I think it's good conservative Judaism, from what I understand, but I think the movement has defined itself in very narrow ways, and therefore it's defining everybody out. And by the way, including me, when I looked about where to go, I taught JTS at one point in my life, but my personal observance pattern is inimical to the current version of conservative Judaism. So I didn't even think about going to JPS. I mean, I did. I kind of asked Jack, what do you think? And then I said, okay, fine. What did she say? But I think there's a problem there. But
you went to what for?
When I left Heap University,
Uh-huh.
I wanted to teach only one semester. This was the immediate provocation of my leaving. It wasn't an anti-Zionist thing. I also wanted to be able to spend more time in Israel, which I could do if I had more time not to teach. So I started looking for a place to teach in New York. Honestly, and I went to David Ellen and said, no problem. It was done in about 30 seconds. But all right, so this is good. Continue.
I have a question about the conservative movement. I have two questions, but I'm going to leave one over here. So Adam's working on a speech for the Sheffield conference at the end of March.
Yeah.
Do you know about this?
Yeah.
So I'm editing the journal for it. Sheffield is a grassroots organization started by a rabbi in the Boston area who wants to bring people together to revitalize the conservative movement. This is mostly, I'm guessing, this comes out of Hadar and sort of an effort to rejuvenate the conservative movement. What's your take on this? I'm wondering.
I don't know.
Not the conference, not the network, but efforts to rejuvenate the conservative movement. Are they going anywhere? Is there a reason for people in their 20s and 30s to make an effort to revitalize something that is a relic of? We need American Jewry needs it. Needs movements.
Needs diversity. Otherwise, we have two. Three is much more single three.
Are we post-movemental? That just doesn't sound good. Is there a reason to hold on to the delineation of movements?
Yeah, I think
that's something that's worthwhile for us as.
I don't know if I'm reacting to my own times. I could be, and it is part of the kind of the master theme of moving away from these blocks to individual acts of sampling and assembly, which is the kind of the iPod way of looking at the world. So there's nothing wrong. We'll do Orthodox this, conservative that, reform the other thing, and Christian this, and Sufi the other, and then that's my Jewishness. So having said that, there may still be a place for some Jews to be movement oriented. I happen to think that there's something that is synergistic and works to have this Ramah, Shechta schools, Nativ, JTS, synagogues, United Synagogue, Rabbinical Assembly. I think that these are institutions that actually support a Jewish life, and I am distressed that that family of institutions are very vulnerable right now because of the demography. The conservative movement will shrink more in the next 10 to 20 years. Whoever begins to turn around now will not see results for many years to come. So we have not yet seen the end of the shrinkage of the conservative movement. So there'll be more happening. And I think it's bad. Even reform partisans like David Ellison is not at all pleased that conservative movement is in free fall. And I attribute much of a lot of places to blame. One's on the decline of ethnicity in America, which is not their fault. The other is, I think, the unfortunate overemphasis on literal halakha as being the watchword. I never heard the word halakha when I was growing up. It showed up halakha, text, all this stuff. So there's new inventions of American Jewry. I think it's a mistake. And the third is the poor organization of the United Synagogue under the leadership of Jerry Epstein, who ought to take the occasional change of chancellor to say, my time too has passed, and we should. Huh? Yeah, he left as of tomorrow?
He announced his retirement.
When?
Last year he announced his retirement.
Oh, no!
2009.
Yeah, when he's 65 years old. No.
I agree.
He should leave now.
Wow. So, as a follow-up
I want to
question,
take
I
my-
know this is not relevant to everyone.
It is relevant.
If you had two suggestions to make to the new chancellor of the seminary to be named leader, what would be your suggestions?
Pressure for the resignation of Jerry Epstein,
Okay.
and that's probably the second one too. Really, the United Synagogue needs to change, and also conceive of broadening the tenting and moving in a direction which would de-emphasize halakha as a centerpiece of the movement. It's the wrong flag to fly, and a lot of conservative rabbis come out of there with a kind of an accountant's mindset of how they're going to make people more Jewish. They're going to do, like, remember that thing, the 4 to 7, they're counting mitzvahs, and they're counting mitzvahs being Adam L'Makam. And I think it's a really narrow view of Judaism, and people understand that, and they tolerate it. They think these are nice people. But I think, I wanted to, but fortunately I'll be in Israel. Could you remember your name?
David. The disclaimer is that last week I was in a class where we actually read the 13 places, the
National Foundation of Jewish Culture Study?
Foundation of Jewish Culture Study. And
It's out there, right?
I'm not sure it was, I think Ari sent, Judah Cohen was the professor who, anyway, and I was a bit, this whole notion, firstly the Foundation of Jewish Culture sponsored a paper looking at the impact of Jewish culture. And then we all treated it with a bit of skepticism going into it, because I didn't really see the connection. I don't know, this whole notion of Jewish culture equating to some form of expression of Jewish identity seems to be an accepted thing at the moment because it seems to be quite in and trendy and I think anecdotal. I haven't seen much evidence showing that attending a Jewish cultural event in its broader sense leads to any transformation in Jewish identity.
We had said it.
And that's what I'm saying. But there was an assumption that the measure of people going to these things was a statement of their engagement or their involvement in Jewish communal events. So I'm just wondering about this whole Jewish cultural piece and what role it has, especially when it was already attracting people that you said were largely already engaged in Jewish activities. So I'm wondering that connection between culture and identity has been.
Well, we wrote a conclusion piece which came after the piece that you read. The piece came before. The piece came before said that in the NJPS we found that participating in the consumption of Jewish culture, books, movies, and music, is something that plays a more prominent role in the Jewishness of less engaged Jews than of more engaged Jews. And that, by that I mean that if you can imagine, you have more engaged, less engaged. You look at the slope of Jewish activities. So like Shabbos candlelighting, for example, as a kind of a symbol, declines sharply as you move from engaged to unengaged, in married to intermarried. Jews living in Jewish areas to Jews living in peripheral areas. But Jewish movie going declines starts out lower and winds up higher. It starts at it does go down too, but at a certain point there's a crossover, such that for less engaged Jews, they're more likely to read a Jewish book than to read the Haggadah. As for almost everybody else, they read the Haggadah much more than they read a Jewish book. And so what we argued in the first paper, which we didn't show you, you can see, is that Jewish culture is especially more relevant proportionally for the Jewishness of the unengaged. So this is important to look at. But now we go to these Jewish cultural events and we're getting totally engaged. Having said that, there's a move from the mass to the more elite phenomena. And then we write a piece at the end which says there really is a value to bringing together engaged Jews. It creates it creates that community out there that will create referrals and networks that will stimulate Jewish life. And also, it's not the case that engaged Jews have no chances of intermarrying. They do, and also there's an advertising function that Heed magazine and Amichal Levi and all these Sederama, all these things have, JFredge, so I know that Jews don't need to go to these events to know that they're happening. And when they know that they're happening, that they have a better sense of what being Jewish is all about. So there are effects, but I agree that they're not the ones that they're not the kind of the immediate translation of the aspirations of the UJA Federation in paying for some of these things. Their aspiration, and the reason they paid for the study, was because the National Foundation of Jewish Culture told them that Jewish culture reaches the unengaged. So he said, all right, we'll take a look at that. And we did. He said, no, that's not true. It does other things. And NSJC was happy with our, Richard Siegel, they were happy with our report. It made sense to them. And because it also helped them to make an argument, helps them make an argument, which is an argument that's based on fact and not one based on fantasy. But it's a different argument.
Right.
Yeah. I'm agree with you. Yeah. And tell me again, I'm sorry.
Lisa, that's okay.
No, that's not okay. I'm horrible with names. So, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to try to articulate this in a clear way. So I'm sort of looking at it like there's a Venn diagram sort of thing of engaged and unengaged, and in that sort of space in the middle is where these edgy things exist.
Mm-hmm.
So the question that I have is and I don't know if your study at all went into this, is as organizations like storytelling become more mainstream and become more successful, I guess, by a certain measure, are they pulling people with them, or do they then become part of not yet, storytelling hasn't, but they then become part of the organized Jewish community and then are no longer a draw for that sort of edge, people on the edge?
Well, I think, yeah, but I think the edge, well, if the edge is generational, then it would make sense. Like, the Debbie Friedman music is a good thing, but Debbie Friedman music maybe 20, 30 years ago was the music of campers and younger Jews, and they just got older, now they're baby boomers. I mean, the baby boomers, like, now they're middle-aged people, and they like that music, and the next generation goes, I don't know, I'm not so sure about it. So these things are generational, so that I think each generation needs to invent its own Jewish edge and hold on to it.
But even within this generation, like, I'm trying to think of an example of something that started out like avant-garde and is now sort of
Jewish renewal.
like Cage, right? Started.
Like Jewish previous generation.
The Cage is a coalition for the alternatives of Jewish education. It becomes coalition for advancement of Jewish education.
Right.
And then it becomes like a nice, very nice, warm, fuzzy trade group of Jewish educators, which is a good thing. You know, it doesn't, it lacked, Schiffer Brodsky was a major initiator of that organization, in fact, founder. And Schiffer is a change agent type person, which still is. She hasn't, you know, Kemper Ma was a rebellion. Kemper Ma was opposed by the seminary in the late 40s and started. I had to get started in Chicago. I think the first Kemper Ma started in Wisconsin, not in New York, because it was a peripheral kind of rebellious to them. Young Israel was now old Israel, but then it was young Israel, American Jewish Congress. I mean, so a lot of these, I mean, I think a lot of these things are start out as rebellions and oppositional movements within Judaism. So I think we have to recognize that. It's one of the lessons that oppositional is good. Heat magazine is only appealing to people who have some interest and some knowledge about being Jewish. If you're an Irish Catholic from wherever, from Iowa, you look at this and go, I don't know what to make of this. You have no basis on which to have any attraction to the magazine. There are other problems with magazines, not like that. But so all these things I think are inherently good things, and this is a way I'm trying to get language to appreciate why we want to support these ventures, even if they're iconoclastic, or especially because they're iconoclastic and oppositional. And we've lost that. So Anita.
That too. First one is this past Sunday in the Times. They had an article about what's going on in the Upper West Side Christian community. There's one guy who, if you read it, please fill me in on this. I have it upstairs, but it's there's one fellow that's a model for the entire country. All people are coming. He doesn't really like to be called evangelical, but they have 4 minyanim of 800 people every Sunday. And they moved to 4 different locations. None of them really what I would consider mid-factory type of more avant-garde. It is attracting only young professionals in their 20s and 30s. I think that is older has any look to, and their attraction, according to the Times, is they try not to get too far afield. Their goal is to get them into church and remind them that Christianity can play a part in their lives. That is their single most goal. So to me it sounded very institutional rather than trying all these more avant-garde things. If you read the article, and he's being extraordinarily successful. And I'm sitting there going,